Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining me today in today's program, The Wholeness Project. My name is Joel Osebo. I'm a relationship and mental health coach. I'm always excited, looking forward to every Monday where I just come on live, on four platforms on my Facebook, YouTube, and Instagram, Joel Osebo, to just share some great tips that can help you restore wholeness and renewed focus in your relationship and your mental health. I want to welcome you to a brand new month. It's the 1st of June 2026. I mean, we've seen January and right now we're in June. And I believe that all that you desire regarding your relationship and mental health will come together for you. And today I have an amazing topic that I want to share with us. And I look forward to it being a very, very big blessing to you and something you can draw some good insight and nugget from concerning your health, your relationship, and your emotions. Today, I'm going to be looking at what I call why anxiety is skyrocketing in 2026 and why your spirituality matters in the process of managing your anxiety. And again, just brief introduction about myself again. I'm Joel. I have a master's in clinical mental health counseling. I'm a relationship and management coach. I run this live program every Monday, 9:15 a.m. Eastern Time Zone. I look forward to seeing you and I look forward to you sharing this amazing sessions that just helps to educate and empower you to manage four pillars in your life: your family, your relationship, your mental health, and your spirituality. Like I said, today I'm going to be looking at why anxiety is skyrocketing in 2026. So we're going to be looking at the 2026 anxiety emergency, what's going on in our world today, causing a lot of people to be anxious about the issues that they are dealing with in their life. So, what is anxiety? We're going to take a look at that. We'll look at why it's skyrocketing in 2026. We'll look at how these four pillars of our lives are under attack as a result of anxiety. Then, like I always do, I provide strategies, interventions, and techniques that can help you manage every area of discussions that we talk about here on the Wholeness Project. We're going to be looking at the CBT tools and the DBT tools that is going to help you. Then why faith is a missing variable in the process of managing our anxiety. Then, like I always do, giving you a 7 days challenge for your anxiety action plan. And quickly, some statistics for us to look at why 2026 anxiety emergency matters. Anxiety is now the most diagnosed mental health condition in the United States. And I can tell you it's a global issue also. This is not just a trend, it's a crisis. The world is going through anxious moment. Government, in politics, in finances, in different sectors, in different markets, the tensions, the anxiety, the fears that is crippling the hearts of many is unimaginable in 2026. Looking at all of the wars, all of the economic and political fights going on globally, the anxiety level is high. 42.5 million Americans suffer from anxiety disorders. That's according to Mental Health America 2026. That's a large number of people. And one thing about anxiety, it doesn't just affect the individual alone, it has a spiral effect on those who are close to them. Then 19.1% of US adults had an anxiety disorder in the past year. 31.1% lifetime stands a lifetime risk of developing an anxiety disorder. That's one in three Americans. So you can want to extrapolate it, maybe one in five people globally. That 1.9% of adolescents have an anxiety disorder. Then 10% plus 10% rise in anxiety and depression since 2025. Then 52.6% of adults have never tried therapy or psychiatry. So the issue of anxiety is a big one. It's a global pandemic, much more than a lot of the diseases that is creeping up in our world today. Anxiety is a crisis. It's not just a trend, and it's something I want you to pay attention to be mindful of in your life. Then, what is anxiety? Because it is important. The anxiety, when we talk about anxiety, it boils down on you understanding the enemy within. Because anxiety is not just an external factor, it's something that happens within us. Anxiety is your brain's alarm system firing in the absence of actual danger. So, in other words, you are anxious when there's no danger. And a lot of us are facing this. People, or many of us, were anxious even in the absence of danger. It is a normal physiological response to perceived threat that becomes disordered when it is chronic. So this might not be really happening, but you feel there's a danger. And when it persists, it can become a disorder and it can become chronic. When it is chronic, it can become disproportionate or uncontrollable. It means we can't control a lot of the things that is going on in our lives today because of the events that is happening in our world. So there's so much anxiety out there. And it is worrisome. It is troubling, and it cripples people. It cripples family. It cripples relationships. It cripples our mental health and also our spirituality. There are three dimensions I want us to quickly take a look at when it comes to understanding anxiety, the brain in anxiety. So, first, anxiety starts in the brain. There's what we call the amygdala hijack. When the alarm fires before logic can engage, a lot of the times we don't put reasoning to work. We respond, we react to things. We don't think. When we don't think, then there's a problem going on in our brain. The HPA axis floods the body with cortisol and adrenaline. Anytime you are anxious, you feel a lot of heat in your body. You feel a lot of tension. You feel a lot of people get into panic attack when they are anxious about things. The prefrontal context, that is your decision making part in your brain, goes partially offline. A lot of the times, when you find that you're not able to make good decision, great decision, that something is going up in your mind, in your brain, then your body enters fight, flee. That's what we call the fight, flight, freeze mode. That is your heartbeat, your breath, your muscles. You begin to feel really, really anxious because of the things you are dealing with. Then chronic anxiety physically shrinks the hippocampus over time. So in other words, the more you become you become so anxious about the things you are dealing with, it begins to drain your strength. It begins to drain your ability to think, to reason, or to make major milestones in your life. Then what are the types of anxiety? What are the types of anxiety? One, there's what we call GAD. It means general anxiety disorder. This anxiety, you're just worried about a lot of things. You are consistently worried. Not just about one thing. You're worried about money. You're worried about work. You're worried about business. You're worried just about everything going on in your life. We call that generalized anxiety disorder. There's another anxiety that is called social anxiety. This is fear of judgment and humiliation. You don't want people. You're afraid to be in the midst of people because you don't want to be judged. You don't want people to say negative things about you. You don't want people to say wrong things about you. So you have that social anxiety. You don't want to mix up with other people. That's what we call panic disorder. By panic disorder, there's this sudden intense episode. You're just afraid about every little thing. When something crashes or you hear a bang, you hear a loud noise, you get into a panic mode. That is another type of anxiety. Then there's what we call the PTSD. The PTSD is the anxiety rooted in trauma and past threat, based on past experiences, past heartbreaks, past being in a war situation, in an accident, or something happened in the past that you've not been able to process. It becomes a very big anxious issues. Then health anxiety, when people have persistent fear of illness or death. I've met a lot of clients, people who are just scared about death, about illness. All of these things leads to anxiety. So how does it show up in our life? First, physically, you begin to experience the tightness of your chest, the raising of your heart, your shallow breath. Some people can be shaky also. Some people might be afraid to even go out. Some people are even afraid of dark places. People are afraid of height because of the issues that they are dealing with. Then it also shows up mentally when you begin to have raising thoughts. You have your catastrophizing issues. You are avoiding people. You become a people pleaser. You are overworking. These are signs of how anxiety shows up in our lives. Then relationally, you begin to withdraw because you don't trust people anymore. You don't that relationship is not beneficial to you anymore. You begin to withdraw. You become irritable. Then trust issues. When you begin to have trust issues with people, you don't want to be in their presence, and when you see them, you begin to have those anxious moments. Then spiritually, you begin to doubt. When your faith, your spirituality, you are in doubt of the existence of God or the existence of good things in your life. You begin to distance yourself from others, even in your own spiritual space, and you shut down on your prayer life, or even listening or being congregating with other people within your religion or within your spirituality. So anxiety is a big deal. It is a big deal. Like we said, it is not just a trend. It is chronic and it is a global issue. And today in this program, my goal is to provide you with strategies, with interventions and techniques that is going to help you manage your anxiety and also be in control of the event that happens in your life. Why is anxiety skyrocketing in 2026? Why? Why? What's the reason? Why is it skyrocketing? There are seven cultural forces that is driving this crisis. Seven cultural forces which we are going to look at right now that drives anxiety in our world. This is not a personal weakness. It is a cultural emergency with identifiable causes. So in other words, when people are anxious, it's not just a personal weakness. It's not that you're weak. There are cultural factors. The things we see with our eyes, the things we hear, the things we perceive in our environment, they lead us to these anxiety struggles in our lives. The first one is social media and comparison culture. We live in a world that is driven by technology, that is driven by social media. In a lot of us, we what we see online, we tend to want to make it our own lifestyle. We try to want to adopt it. So constant exposure to curated perfection creates an anxiety loop of comparison and inadequacy. An average person spends about 6.5 hours a day on screens. So when we spend time on screens, the waves from the screen, the comparison, the pictures we see, the things we hear people do on social media can make us very anxious. So, in other words, we want to say just mind the intake of content from social media, because a lot of the time it helps us. We begin to compare ourselves with other people, and that can hurt us, that can harm us. Then the number two culture out of the seven cultures, what we call the post-pandemic trauma residue. So COVID-19 has left a global PTSD footprint. So there's people are hyper vigilant, people are afraid of death, people have economic shock, and social disconnection are still unprocessed. So the things that happen during COVID-19 is still affecting our world today. And that's a cultural issue we need to take note of, because right now there's Ebola coming up from Congo again in Africa, and the scare is it might be going on all over the world gradually. There's lots of diseases being coming up in different areas of the world. This post-traumatic pandemic traumatic residue is still affecting the world globally. Then financial stress and economic anxiety. This is a cultural factor. It's not a personal weakness. There's inflation. There's how the housing costs and economic uncertainty have created generational financial anxiety. Money is the number one reported stressor in 2026, no doubt. Families, individuals, they are stressed up because of money. The cost of gas, the cost of food. People are spending over 100% of what they used to spend a year ago in their food. So financial crisis and economic anxiety is one of the cultural issues. That's why anxiety is skyrocketing. In 2026, that's what we call information overload and news doom. When you look at the news today, 247 news circles, the political division and the algorithmic outrage feeds are proven to elevate cortisol and trigger chronic anxiety states. So when you look at your feed, you look at your Instagram, your TikTok, the news doom is a lot. There's so much information out there that 90% of the time they bring anxiety to us, they bring fear to us. So what does it mean? You got to be very selective the things you want to hear from the news or the information that you overload your mind with. Then loneliness and epidemic is very big. Over 50% of US adult feels chronically isolated. People are feeling so isolated today. People are feeling so isolated. So loneliness triggers the same brain response as physical pain. When people are lonely, they get into anxiety. They become so anxious. Then spiritual disconnection. A lot of people are disconnecting from spirituality today. Whether you're Christian, Muslim, people practice different religion today, but there's a lot of spiritual disconnection today. So as religious participation declines, anxiety arises. That's the reality, because man is a spirit first. You're first a spirit living in the body and existing here on earth with your five senses. So when there's a disconnection with your spirit, with your spirituality, anxiety goes up. So without meaning, purpose, and community, the existential vacuum fills with fear. If you're not connecting with other people, you're not hanging out with other people, you're not volunteering, you're not being a blessing to others, anxiety creeps up. Then, lastly, in the seven cultural forces driving this crisis is unprocessed trauma and grief. Millions carry unresolved childhood wounds, relational trauma, and grief that was never processed. Anxiety is the symptom of buried pain. People are dealing with pains. And that's one thing about the Wholeness Project. We're here to help you process those unprocessed pain. We're here to help you look at what happened in the past and how you can make meaning from the past to live the life that you were destined and made to live. And if you don't process your trauma, your heartbreaks, your disappointment, your grief, your losses, your pains, anxiety will always take a toll on you. It will impact your family, it will impact your relationships, it will impact your mental health, and also affect your spirituality. But I mean, you don't have to be scared about that, because here on the Wholeness Project, we'll be able to walk with you to deal with all of these issues that leads to anxiety in your life. Now, these four pillars are under attack. Anxiety will destroy your wholeness. One, your family. When there's so much anxiety in your family, anxious parents raise anxious children. It is neurologically transmitted. When parents are anxious, or caregivers are anxious, or guardians, if they are anxious, it automatically, transmit to the children. So that's why you must guard your heart. You must guard your family against anything that can cause anxiety. Anxiety in the home creates a climate of tension, unpredictability, and fear. So when there's anxiety in the home of what to eat, of money, of economic issue, it creates tension, it creates fear. Parental worry communicates the world is not safe to children. So every time we are worried, we are communicating to our children that the world is not safe. We're not building solid, resilient skills if we're always under anxiety. Then anxiety-driven control and overprotection stunts child development. Because of anxiety, we don't want our kids to go out to play anymore. We don't want them to go to some certain places because we are anxious, we are scared, we are afraid. And when we do that, it stunts the growth and the development of our children. Then healing your anxiety is one of the most powerful gifts you give your family. And we can walk with you on this. If you're feeling anxious about anything at all, that is, that can cripple your family life, we can walk with you. When you are able to heal yourself, your master anxiety, then is a gift you're giving to your family. When it comes to relationship, anxiety triggers attachment insecurity, clinginess, or emotional avoidance. When people are afraid, they want to attach to people, even their abusers, because they'll be scared. This person is abusing me, though I know, but I can't leave him. If I leave him, what's going to happen to me? It helps. It actually hurts relationship when there's so much anxiety. When he's out, you're not sure what he's doing there. You become anxious. You're not sure what's happening to her. You're anxious. It hurts the relationship. Fear of rejection causes people pleasing and loss of authentic self because of anxiety. When you don't want to be rejected, you are afraid to be rejected. You begin to please people that you shouldn't please, and a lot of the time you can lose your identity because of anxiety. Then also, chronic worry about relationship becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. So because you are thinking about the relationship, you are so worried about everything, the things you are worried about can become the reality of that relationship. And so you got to be careful of how you worry, the things you are worried about in your relationship. Anxious partners struggle to be present. They live in worst case scenario. And that's, you can be, what it means is when you're always anxious, you can enjoy the moment. When good things are happening in the relationship, in the marriage, you won't be there to enjoy because your mind is all over the place. You are concerned about the past, about the present, about the future. Then lastly, you must understand that intimacy requires safety. Anxiety destroys the felt sense of safety. When you're in a relationship, it's important to know that for you to work together, safety is important. Anxiety destroys safety in relationship. So I want to encourage you. One of the things we do, we work with couples a lot. We work with people who want to get into premarital counseling and marital counseling. Even if it's getting to the point where it's broken, we can work with couples to repair whatever those situations are in their relationship. Your mental health is under attack when we don't control our anxiety. Anxiety is the most common mental health condition. Like we mentioned, statistically, for the 2.5 million Americans, we are going through anxious moment. Untreated anxiety escalates into depression, substance abuse, and burnout. So when people don't manage their anxiety, they look for a way out. And those way out is this. People want to go into substance abuse, they become burnout. Another thing is if you don't manage your anxiety, it leads to depression. When it leads to depression, suicidal thought or homicidal thoughts becomes inevitable. Anxiety literally reshapes the brain through chronic cortisol exposure. So every time you're always anxious, it skews your thinking. You don't see things clearly anymore. You see things from a place of fear. You do things from a place of fear. And you don't want that to be your story every day. That's why we got to manage this anxiety that we confront every day. 1 in 3 Americans will experience anxiety disorder in their lifetime. What that means, people can become practically crippled. You will be able to achieve your goals when you're always anxious. You're afraid to fly. You're afraid to go to work. You're afraid to do a lot of the things you love to do. A lot of people, 1 in 3 Americans, and I would say 1 in 5 in the world, can become crippled because of anxiety. Then, lastly, only 25.6% of those with anxiety globally receive any treatment. And this is important. That's why we encourage you see a therapist, see a counselor, see a pastor, see a coach, see someone that can help you walk through the fears, the struggles, and the challenges that you're dealing with. So that means we have over 70% of people who will deal with anxious issues that can cripple them in life. And for us in FGI Solutions, our goal is to help people walk through their mental health challenges as they regain wholeness and renewed focus in life. Then, lastly, your anxiety can cripple your spirituality. Anxiety is a spiritual battle. Understand this. Because it's sometimes, especially when you can't control things anymore, when things are spiraling out of control, you know that it's no longer a physical battle you are contended with. So anxiety is a spiritual battle. It is rooted in the lie that God cannot be trusted. And that's the truth. This is very big, friends. When we say God cannot be trusted, we become anxious. When you hear scriptures that says, be anxious for nothing, but in everything with prayers and supplications, make your request known unto God. God wants to be involved. That's why your spirituality is important. Your spirituality is important in the process to manage your anger. Fear crowds out faith. So every time you are afraid, you cannot have faith anymore. You cannot fully worship while fully anxious. It is impossible to do that. Anxiety drives performance-based religion instead of rest-based relationship. In other words, you just want to please people, you want to please God, but you are scared. No, with God, with spirituality, whether you practice Hinduism, you practice Christianity, you practice Judaism, just knowing that there's a higher power that you can rest on can make you overcome anxiety. For those who are believers, who are Christians, Proverbs 12:25 says, anxiety weighs down the heart, but a kind word cheers it up. So kind words is a recipe to overcome anxiety. Faith practice rightly is one of the most effective anxiety interventions known. That's the reality. Your spirituality, your faith practice is a big tool for you to overcome anxiety. All right, the next thing I want us to look at is practical tools that you can use to overcome anxiety. In this episode, we've been talking about anxiety, why anxiety is skyrocketing in 2026. We talked about 7 cultural factors that causes all of these, and it's the reality of our life. And we also established that anxiety is not that you are personally weak, no, but the 7 cultural factors we have discussed, they impact us externally and affect us internally. But we can deal with them, we can overcome them. So these are some tools that can help you. One of them is cognitive restructuring. What that means is for you to identify the anxious thought. What are you anxious about? Rate how true it is. What you are scared about, what you are anxious about, rate it 0 to 100%. Is it true or is it false? Then gather evidence for and against it. Write a more balanced thought. So, in other words, we're saying turn your negative thoughts of anxiety into positive one, especially when you discover that it might not be true. The worry time technique. By worry time technique, what we're saying here is schedule a daily 15-minute worry window. Outside that time, postpone all anxious thoughts. This breaks the 247 worry loop. You know what we're saying? If you ask me, even though this is therapeutic, you want to keep a window of after this 15 minutes, I want to edit all the things that I'm worried about. I want to throw them away. You know what? I'm still going to encourage you going the extra mile. When those within that 15 minutes, as those thoughts of worry come, begin to restructure them, begin to turn them how you want them to be for you. Because the words you speak, the thoughts of your heart can become the reality of your heart. So instead of just blocking at that 15 minutes to worry, that 15 minutes begin to change those worry into what you want to see in your life. And you see how your 247 will be filled with lots of energy and grace for you to go through it. The behavioral experiment, what do you do here? Test anxiety prediction. If you fear rejection, send the text. If you fear failure, try the task. Track actual versus predicted outcome. So whatever you are scared of, try it. Try it and see what the outcome is going to go. I mean, the outcome is going to be, and you find out that the things you have been scared about, the worry, the phone calls, or that somebody's going to reject you, or the email is going to bounce, or somebody will not respond to you, might just be a different feeling by the time you try it out. Then thought diffusion. What do we mean by thought diffusion? Separate yourself from the thought. You and your thoughts are not the same. We always say feelings are not fact. So separate yourself from the thought. I notice I'm having the thought in that. So it's not you, it's a thought you are thinking, but that's not who you are. You are not your anxiety, you are the one observing it. This is going to help you a lot. Remember the word thought diffusion. Every time you're anxious, every time you want to feel depressed or something is just giving you some source of concern, separate yourself from it. Look outside of yours. You are different from your thought. You are not your anxiety. You are the one observing it. Always look at things from a place of observation. Observe the situation, observe the worry, observe the relationship, observe the marriage, observe the financial issues. That is going to help you take a better decision every time. Then decatastrophizing. What does this mean? Ask, what is the actual worst case? How likely is it if it happened? Could I survive, cope? What is the most likely outcome? In other words, don't think that the worst will happen to you. Even if you are thinking, ask yourself these questions here. Will it really happen? What is the worst case scenario? Will it ever happen? If it happens, what is going to be the outcome? Just questioning yourself about these things puts you in a better place. Then problem solving versus worrying. Ask, is this within my control? Because a lot of the times, the things that we are anxious about, they may not be within our control. If yes, make an action plan. So if you can control the situation, the thing is, what is the next to do? What can I do? Who can I talk to? What book do I need to read? Where can I source the information to help me resolve this issue? Then, if no, practice acceptance. There are some things we may not be able to control in our lives. Just practice acceptance and release it. Worry solves nothing. That's the reality of our life. Being worried, being anxious will never resolve anything for us. So if you try out these 7 tools, you see that you will be able to manage your anxiety. Then there's another tools that also helps is under the DBT tools. You can regulate your body. When you are anxious, there are things you can do to reset your nervous system. One of them is called the tip grounding. Your temperature, what it means every time you're feeling so anxious, pour some cold water on your face or put a bag of cold frozen fruit on your face. There's a way it's going to activate the diet reflex. Your heart rate will drop about 10 to 25% instantly just by putting cold water on your face or taking a cold shower. Then intense exercise, when you do about a minute of jumping jacks or you do a brisk walk, it burns off the adrenaline, physically flooding your system. So exercise has a way of decompressing us when we are anxious. Space breathing, there's what we call the box breathing. You do 4 counts and you inhale 4, you hold it for 4 seconds, you exhale for 4 seconds, then you hold for 4 seconds. This one activates your vagus nerve and it helps your system to relax the more. Then there's what we call the progressive relaxation. When you tense each muscle group, 10 seconds, so you tense your neck, your shoulder, your arm, your fists, your knees, your thighs. When you tense them for about 10 seconds and you release them, there's a way it helps you to relax. Then also that's what we call the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 grounding technique. When you're anxious, that moment, just relax and just what are the 5 things you can see? What are the 4 things you can touch? What are the 3 things you can hear? What are the 2 things that you can smell? What is the 1 thing that you can taste? All of this is when you do them, it pulls your brain out of the future and back into the present, and then dissipate all those feelings of emotions. Then another technique that works very well is what we call the accepts. Here, distress tolerance when anxiety peaks. So when you don't want things to get things worse, do this. Engage with activities. Do something absorbing to shift your focus. Contribute. Serve someone. This gets you outside your own head. Comparison. Recall harder reasons you survived and grew through. So look at the past victories you had. Then emotions. Opposite. Watch something funny. Listen to praise music. In other words, when you are angry, look at something that is opposite that can make you happy, that can make you feel good. Push away temporarily. Journal the worry. Set a timer. Revisit it later. So when you're worried about something, just push it aside. Try to focus your energy on something else. Then thoughts, count down backward from 100. Recite a psalm. What that means, when you're having a negative thought, just stop. No, I don't want this negative 100, 99, 98. When you do that, you see that your thought process is going to change immediately. Then sensations, the use of cold water, strong scent, slow sip of hot tea can get your brain to the back. This is what we call the accept technique that helps you to overcome anxiety. Then the opposite action, I love this a lot. Here you break the anxiety avoidance circle. So what do? Anxiety says avoid. What do? Do the opposite. Approach gradually, one small step at a time. In other words, when things are not the way you want them to do the opposite action, and you see that you overcome it. Anxiety says hide. Do the opposite. Reach out to one safe person today. Anxiety says catastrophize. Do the opposite. Name the most likely outcome. Anxiety says freeze. Do the opposite. Take one small action right now. Anxiety says control. Do the opposite. Practice surrender in prayer. So when we do opposite actions, it helps us to manage our anxiety. Then also, when face is a missing variable, as we begin to come to a close to this, I want to thank you for joining me. We have been discussing why anxiety is skyrocketing in 2026 and how you can overcome it using your faith. Faith as the missing variable, what decades of research now confirms. Now, hear this. Science says a weekly institute analysis 2026 of thousands of high quality studies found that positive associations between religion and mental health outnumber negative ones by 10 to 1. Wow, this is big. This is very big. We are saying here that spirituality and religion can help you overcome anxiety, even depression. Most of the mental health struggles that people have, by spirituality, by practicing religion in the right way or practicing spirituality in the right way, can help you overcome anxiety. Practices like prayer, worship, and spiritual community consistently reduce anxiety symptoms. But if you notice today, these are the things that people are running away from. People don't want to pray anymore. People don't want to worship. People don't want to be part of a community. People just want to be about themselves. I understand that sometimes there can be lots of dramas in communities, but you know what? Most of the time, these are the places that people get healing. Scripturally, Philippians 4, 6 to 7 says, do not be anxious about anything, but in every situation, by prayer and petition, present your request to God, and the peace of God, which transcends all understanding, will guard your heart and your mind. In other words, these 4 things I want to share right now in the space of faith missing variable can help you overcome anxiety. Prayer, the original anxiety protocol. So prayer helps to overcome anxiety. From research, regular prayer is linked to lower cortisol levels and reduce anxiety. Then Philippians 4, 6 to 7 tells us that it's not poetry, it is a clinical intervention for anxiety. Yes, you might not be a Christian, you might not believe in Jesus Christ. Even if you do believe in Jesus Christ, memorizing and quoting all the time Philippians 4, 6 to 7 will help you to overcome anxiety. It is not a poetry, it is a clinical intervention. Prayer activates the same brain pathways as mindfulness meditation. Cast your anxieties on Him because He cares for you. The posture of release. When you learn to trust a higher power, you learn to trust God, your anxiety subsides. Then faith community. Loneliness is killing a lot of people. 50% of Americans feel isolated. Faith community directly counters this. Church attendance correlates with lower depression and anxiety rates. So whether you go to church, you go to a temple, you go to mosque, going to a mosque, going to a church, going to a synagogue has a way of reducing your depression and anxiety. Spiritual community provides accountability, belonging, and shared purpose. And Hebrew 10:25 says, do not give up meeting together. God prescribed community. So when you're a part of a community, it can help you overcome anxiety, help you overcome depression. Then surrender what control cannot do. So what you cannot handle by yourself, what do? Anxiety is fundamentally about control. So when we are not able to control things, we become anxious. Faith is fundamentally about surrender. Faith is saying, God, I believe you can take care of this. Matthew 6:27 says, can any of you add a single hour to your life by worrying? We cannot. So surrendering control to God is the highest form of anxiety management. So when we're talking about anxiety management, it's about surrendering your control, not to a man, not to yourself, but to God. Then Lamentation 3:23 says, new mercies every morning. God is not surprised by your tomorrow. This is big. God already knows what's going to happen to you tomorrow. So trust Him today that He's going to take care of tomorrow. And this is very important. Then scripture as cognitive restructuring. What that means, you can use scriptural verses, holy text, the Bible, to restructure every form of anxiety that might be going through your mind. Romans 12:2 says, be transformed by the renewing of your mind. CBT in the scripture. So you see that counseling techniques, they are scriptural. A lot of them are very, very scriptural. You can use them to overcome your mental health struggle. Then Isaiah 26:3 says, perfect peace for those whose mind are fixed on you. So for you to find peace, for you to have peace, fix your mind on God, what God can do, not what you cannot do. Because when you focus on the things you cannot do, what the government cannot do, or what people can do for you, you become more anxious. Then also scripture memorization literally rewires anxious neural pathways. That's why I encourage people, memorize the scripture, store it, you recall it back again. You think about it, you speak it. It helps you rewire your mind. Then lastly, we have here the word of God is the ultimate counter narrative to anxious thinking. So for those who believe in God, who believe in the power of the scriptures and the Bible, when you use the word of God all the time, is the ultimate solution to helping you take care of anxiety in your life. As we begin to round off quickly, I want to share this 7-day action plan with you. This is going to help you to help you overcome anxiety in your life. There's the day 1, you do audit. Day 2, you breathe it. Day 3, you ground it. Day 4, you challenge it. Day 5, you connect it. Day 6, you surrender it. Day 7, you celebrate it. All of these things are going to help you overcome your anxiety. Oh, thank you so much for joining me today. Again, I want to say this: anxiety is not your destiny. Peace is your inheritance. Believe it. To live a life of anxiety will cripple your family life, it will cripple your relationship, it will cripple your mental health, and also cripple your spirituality. But know this: peace is your inheritance. The Lord is near. Do not be anxious about anything. Turn everything back to God. Don't try to be in control of things. The more you try to control things, the more anxiety and depression want to take over you. I want to thank you for joining me. If you want to talk to a coach, to a therapist, I will be glad to work with you. To go through whatever you're dealing with from childhood, your relationship, your marriage, your mental health, your spirituality. At FGI Solutions Incorporated, what we do best is to see that you have restored wholeness, renewed focus in life. You can reach us. You can go to our Facebook page. You can go to our website at joelusebo.com, fgicoaching.com, and book an appointment for us to just talk, and then we'll see where we can work together. I want to thank you again for joining me today. It's been an amazing time just sharing with us about how we can become, we can handle anxiety in our lives. Anxiety is not you. It's not a personal journey. It is something that is affected by our cultural system, but you can deal with it through faith and through putting into practice all of the strategies, interventions, and techniques that I've shared. Same time next week, 9:15 a.m. Eastern Time Zone, I'll be back with another episode on the Wholeness Project. This is your friend, Joel Osebo. Bye for now.